Talk about responsive. I get a little cough. I've already had a lifesaver and a walk. Thank you for taking good care of your pastor. I have to also just make a quick comment about keeping faith. Neither wind, nor rain, nor broken elbow will keep keeping faith away. God bless you. So, when we think about life, there are two words that all of us have said, and we've said them in either order, either this way or this way, and it perfectly describes a good majority of life on this planet. We've all been there. The minute I say these words, you're going to relate to them. As a matter of fact, you might even find yourself starting to say them with me. What now? Or now what? It seems that the human experience is full of obstacles, of trials, of undesirable surprises, of giants, of wind, and of waves, storms that come without any warning. And the question of God, where are you and do you care whether I drown? We've all been there, and we will all be there again. It is the human experience. I'd love to wave the magic wand and have it be rainbows, butterflies, puppies, or kittens. But that's just not how life works. And this is the beauty of these passages, because I think that in talking about them, we really get a hold of something meaty that really speaks to where we live and where we are and how we should live and how we should endure the storms and the trials of life. It's always helpful, I think, to kind of go through and do just a little background behind some of the text. And so you may not know this, but the 39 books of the New Testament, of Old Testament, and if you want to remember how many words or how many books there are in the Old Testament, Old has 3 letters, Testament has 9, so 39 books to the Old Testament. Such deep theological secrets I reveal, I understand. You say, well, what about the New Testament then? Well, that's 27. That's 3 times 9. So there you go. Well, for the Old Testament, although the book's various writings had been out there, these writings weren't compiled into the Old Testament. Actually, well into Israel's history, they were actually in captivity. The Babylonian Empire had come and had taken over and had carried everybody away. And so they're living in another land with another language, wondering about getting home. And in the midst of that, the scribes began putting together the Old Testament. And imagine how important this particular story that we read in Samuel would be for people who had just been carried off by an empire that was far bigger and far greater and worshipped a different God than them. To hear the story of David coming forth in the power of God to slay this giant. That had to be a huge story of hope. Well, in the New Testament, people kind of debate when was Mark written, because there's an important year, and that's 70 AD. In 70 AD, Jerusalem was overrun once again by the Romans, and they did such a thorough job of overrunning Israel, it never existed again until 1948. And the Gospel of Mark is either written just before that happened, where people could see the writing on the wall, or it happened, or it was written after that, when again, it would be, oh my gosh, our nation is gone, persecution of Christians has begun. That sounds an awful lot like Wicked Ways to me. God, where are you? And so we see the text, both of these, both at the time that they were compiled and arranged. The original the hearers at that time were very much facing trials and great tribulation, and were asking the very same questions of God, where are you? Don't you care? Don't you care that we're about to drown? So a few thoughts on these passages. Well, I first just have to tell a story. Tina and I have the most wonderful friends, Gail and Gordon. They are the most wonderful, wonderful people. And they've been incredibly kind to us. Now, Gordon comes from Great Britain, so he has not only the accent, but he also has that dry sense of humor that comes with it. And we happened to visit them. Tina and I visited them at Nicaragua, and they live, I know when we say Nicaragua, you think grass hut. This was a gated community with 5 private beaches on the ocean. It was a nice place. And we were going to go horseback riding at noon. Well, the weather is pretty simple in Nicaragua at that time. It's always going to be 88 degrees and sunny. It was going to be really hot. It was going to be, why we picked noon, I have no idea. But Gail wanted to make sure that we would not be overcome with the sun. And so she was talking to us about sunscreen. She was talking to us about wearing a hat. She was talking to us about having plenty of water. And all of this time, all of her attention was focused on Tina and myself. And there stood Gordon, feeling left out. And finally, he looked and with British humor just said to his wife, "Mind if I decimated?" And that's a phrase that Tina and I use to this very day with each other. But that's kind of what the disciples were saying. Mind if I decimated? It was a terrifying experience. In the midst of that terrifying experience, Jesus was already present. And so even when we're asking, like, God, don't you care? God was there already. And I think I would do a disservice. Many preachers who talk on these particular texts kind of give you the rah-rah speech of, if you have enough faith, you'll overcome everything. And if you don't overcome, it's your fault that you didn't have enough faith. And I think that is a fallacy, actually. I think that's just an outright lie. Because I think what we need to do is we always need to look at the Scripture in context. We need to look at all of Scripture, not just one particular passage. place that I would like us to consider comes to us from the only sermon in the New Testament. It's the book of Hebrews. Hebrews was not written as a letter. It was actually a sermon that was given. I hope to deliver a sermon someday that approaches the magnanimity and the power of the book of Hebrews. And in what we now know as the 11th chapter of Hebrews, we come to the great chapter of faith. And it is a very interesting thing. We get the definition of faith. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. We're told that all who come to God must believe that God is, and that he rewards those who diligently seek him. And then the book goes on, and it begins to talk about the faith of Abraham, the faith of Isaac and Moses. And it just goes through this incredible list. And it's victory after victory after victory after victory, until there's a curious turn. Particularly if we look at verses 30 through the end of the chapter. The text talks about, remember the story of the walls of Jericho coming down? It talks about that. It talks about the faith of Rahab, who was the prostitute who helped and hid the spies. It talks about the faith of Gideon. It talks about even the faith of Samson, and the faith of David, and the faith of Samuel. And then it says, these people who through faith subdued kingdoms, worked righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, there's the story of Daniel, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword. But then it begins to make a turn. And with little warning, after reading of all of these tremendous victories, it says, others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. Others had trial of mockings and scourgings and of chains and imprisonments. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, they were tempted, were slain with the sword. They were persecuted to such a degree that they had to wander about in the desert with sheepskins and goatskins, of whom the world was not worthy. And then speaking of both people, those who have had triumph and those who have had trial, it says, and these, having obtained a good testimony through faith, did not receive the prize, for God had provided something better. And then we come to the next chapter that says, therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and run with patience and perseverance the race that is set before us. What I think the lesson of the wind and the waves and the warrior that we are to grasp is what I call ambidextrous faith. Ambidextrous means you can do something with either hand. I am hopelessly right-handed, so everything that I attempt to do right-handed. My mom was ambidextrous, and so she would do some things with the right hand, but she would do others with the left. and it was something to see. And in that same light, ambidextrous faith is the faith that perseveres when things go well and when things do not go well. It is the faith that keeps in the race and keeps taking the next step, even though the road ahead isn't seen or is unknown. I love the part that says that we are surrounded with a great cloud of witnesses. I have a couple quick stories to illustrate that. Imagine me in 6th grade. I had the same wonderful hourglass figure that I have now, and it held just about as much sand. And our homeroom was in competition, and I needed to represent the homeroom and run a track race of 100 yards with hurdles. Buffalo don't jump. Amen. Right. You want a gazelle for that. You don't want a moose. No one else volunteered. So I was stuck doing that. But what made it worthwhile as I plowed over those, because I don't think I cleared one of them. At least I didn't fall flat, but I knocked over many a hurdle on the way, was that there was a guy from 8th grade who was one of the cool 8th graders, and he ran the whole length of the sideline, clapping and cheering me on. Like that was 40-some years ago, and I still get choked up. He had no idea how much it meant. The second story is that when I obtained a master's degree from Spring Arbor University, they held the graduation at the big church in Spring Arbor. And so the big church has a big sanctuary, and it has a big gallery in it. And so they put all of the graduates in a wing somewhere where we got our cap and gowns fitted and all of that. Got the tassels on the proper side, got all lined up. They said, now we're going to march through the hallways, and then you'll take your seat in the sanctuary. And by golly, when the doors opened, there were all of the professors in their caps and gowns. And, they all have doctorates, so they've got all the special cords and the special hats. And they're clapping as we walk by. And then, when we came into the sanctuary, the entire gallery stood and applauded. Powerful. Powerful. I suggest to you that as each of us are on our faith journey, those who have gone ahead, they're cheering. Come on, Karen. You can do it. I know we get weary, we get tired, we lose hope. But when we remember that we are not alone, that gives us the edge to keep going. we are not alone. The wind, the waves, the warriors may be big, but they are not as big as our God, and they are not as big as the cloud of witnesses who said, you can do this. Keep putting one foot ahead of the other. And it is through our perseverance, our ambidextrous faith, that God rewards us, not only with his presence in the moment, but with all of eternity in his presence too. When we join the company of all of those who have run that same race. And so I think our message today is, remember, you have a cloud of witnesses cheering you on, of people who face all of the same things of life and maybe more, and found God faithful. And now they're cheering for you to finish the race that's set before you. May we finish that race in the knowledge and the assurance of God's love and of God's presence and of knowing that our loved ones who have gone on before are cheering for us and waiting